Hello everyone! Welcome to another installment in my video series where I'll be describing the classes for my specialized class leveling system I made for D&D. This system uses a more fun leveling progression manner than regular D&D, where you get to mix and match classes more effectively and really customize your character to no end. If you have no idea how this system works, you can watch this video section I have right here to explain how everything functions. And if you already know what's going on, skip to the timestamp on screen. 30-second recap, go. So basically, at level 1, you'll take 3 branches. The first branch you'll take is going to determine what your main class is. So in this example here, my main class will be Crusader. This determines what my starting benefits will be. So I get the starting benefits of a Crusader class. I also get the Journey Spells feature from Crusader, but that's aside the point for now. And my main class hit die will be a Crusader's, which is a D10. My spell stat for the rest of my character's career will be Charisma, which means no matter how many levels in any other class I take, Charisma will always be the spellcasting stat that I use for any spell DC or attack roll that I make. After selecting my first branch for being my main class, I get 2 more branches after that. So for example, I could take 2 branches this direction to pick up a +1 caster and a channel divinity in this example. Now, what this basically means is that from here on forward, every time I level up, I can take 2 branches in any class. So for example, if I wanted to take my level 2 benefits by grabbing a branch over here and grabbing a branch over here, that would be totally legal, and now I'm a level 2 and I'm 100% Crusader. But of course, I can also multi-class, which means that level 2, instead of taking any branches in Crusader, I could say take a 2-branch dip into Magus, which this means that I'm a level 2 character total. 3 branches are in Crusader and 2 branches in Magus. Since I took a multi-class into Magus, I use the D8 hit dice for this level. But again, I would still be rolling D10s if I take short rest or roll hit dice for any reason, because my main class's hit die is a D10 from that first starting branch. The other thing you can do at level 1 is, instead of taking all 3 branches from your level 1 in your main class, you could put just 1 branch in the main class and split up the other 2 between other classes. So for example, I could take my main class as Crusader, take a branch in Paladin, and also take a branch in Magus. So now I'm a level 1 character where I only have the starting benefits of Crusader, but I get Brute spells from Magus, Holy spells from Paladin, and Journey spells from Crusader, which means those are my 3 features that I get at level 1. And now, as I've said in the past, from now on out, every time you level up, you take 2 more branches in any class. You could multi-class to do that, which is what I explained off the rip. You could put it into one of your subclasses, which is just subclass leveling. So I could put 2 levels into Paladin or Magus. I could main class level by putting both my branches into Crusader, or you can do what's called split class leveling, which is where you take a branch in your main class. So for example, I could main class 1 branch in Crusader and take my second branch in Magus. This is split leveling, and what's important about split leveling is even though Magus has a D8 hit dice, I will still be rolling a D10 because my main class, Crusader, has a D10 hit dice. And when you split class, you always roll the hit dice of your main class, not the split dice. It doesn't matter which one's bigger, it's whichever one is your main class. So this means that leveling with a wizard and a fighter, if wizard is your main class, you probably want to individually level each class one at a time, even if it's your subclass, because that way you get a bigger hit dice. But if fighter is your main class, then putting them together will actually increase the total hit points that you'll get, because you'll be leveling a wizard slower, but also being able to roll with the fighter's hit dice. So as you'll note throughout these, there's going to be a lot more ASIs, and that's because this is designed for more numbers progression than normal D&D. And as such, you'll start with lower overall stats, but be able to build those stats more often than you would on a typical D&D character. And that's not part of feats, because feats are separate. Usually you'll get about 3 to 4 feats in total. And the reason for that is because, one, feats can level up in my version, and two, the feats are a little bit weaker than their regular counterparts. The other thing I need to bring up is proficiency bonus. Your proficiency bonus will start at 0, and depending on how you take a background, it can be anywhere from 0 to 2. Most likely you'll get it to around 1 to 2. But then you can get proficiency bonus upgrades when you take class upgrades, which means that your proficiency bonus is going to be staggered a bit differently than normal class progression. The only other thing I need to bring up is caster level, and I'll bring up this caster level diagram right here quick. Basically, whenever you get a feature that says +1 caster or +2 caster, for example, on the Crusader, there is a +2 or +1 caster right over here, and there's a +2 caster over here. This will increase your caster level. It'll tell you how many spells you get per long rest and what their levels can be. Obviously, for selecting spells, you'll be getting things like this feature right here that says +2 spells known. So for known casters, or spontaneous casters as they're called in this list, those will be spells known. And that means that when you get that feature from any list that you have access to, you can pick, for this example right here, 2 spells known, and you add them to your spell list, and then you can cast them whenever you want. So for example, on a character like the Cleric, which is a prepared caster, you'll get features like this, +1 prepared spell, which allows you to prepare extra spells whenever you prepare spells. That's it. Now that we're back, I want to say a few things about Sorcerer before we get into it. Now, unlike the last few classes that I've explained so far, Sorcerer is a full caster. The last ones I did, of course, were being the Fighter, which is a pure martial class, and the Paladin and Crusader, although they both have access to some spellcasting, very martial focused. And so this will be the first one that I'm doing that is a full caster. So keep in mind that it is going to be quite a bit different compared to those ones. For example, way less ability score improvements and feats. You'll see things like +1, +2, and +3 caster way more often in these classes, because full casters, of course, have a much higher spell progression than other classes, such as the Paladin, who, got short rest spells, and the Crusader, which just got a lot less spell casting than some classes would. All that being said, I think it's time we get into the class itself. So the starting benefits of a Sorcerer: they get 6 plus their Constitution modifier in hit points, 1 hit dice, proficiency in daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, light crossbows, and you get to choose 1 set of tools: charisma and constitution saving throws, and you can choose 2 from Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, and Religion to gain proficiency in for your skills. You also get a +1 to your caster level from the starting benefits. This is important because it makes it so that there's actually a reason to take the starting caster, because normally you're going to get a lot better proficiencies for weapons and armor and such if you take a martial class as you're starting, and you'll also get better hit points. But if you do that, you won't get that +1 caster, and so that's a little bit of a reason to take a caster as your main class instead of just picking a martial that also has charisma as their spell stat. Speaking of spell stat, sorcerers get charisma as their spellcasting modifier and spell stat for the rest of their career if you start as a sorcerer, and their hit dice will be d6s, which may sound small, but there are classes in this system that are d4s, so not the smallest. Of course, we'll see those later, as the sorcerer is not one of them. The other thing you'll get when you start as a sorcerer is the first branch feature, which is sorcery spells, which says that you gain access to the sorcerer spell list, a +1 to your caster level, and learn 2 cantrips. You are also a spontaneous caster and will gain 4 known spells from any list you have access to. And as I've said before, right now we only have access to the sorcerer spell list, unless we took the feat that allows us to take an extra spell list and gain access to it. But most likely we didn't use our origin feat on that, unless you did. You could have. So you'll probably just pick up these 2 cantrips and 4 known spells from the sorcery list. Now, unlike a prepared caster, a spontaneous caster gains known spells, which means that once you pick the spells, they're on your list and you can't really change them, at least not rules as written. I, as a DM, would allow my players to, if they had a spell that they were not using and said that they really didn't like it, probably whenever they level up or something, they could swap one out if they really wanted to. But of course, that's for you to decide, and rules as written, that's not how it works. But let's start moving towards the better features on the sorcerer that really makes the sorcerer, which is the meta magic. So first, we'll pick up a +2 to our caster level, and then a feat. And then the feature that makes the sorcerer, meta magic. This is quite the mouthful, but I'll try to explain it as best I can. You gain 2 sorcery points, and you will gain more with a plus #SP feature. And the hashtag here is just meaning any number that it explains. You can use these points to fuel your meta magic options, and you'll have access to later. Any feature starting with meta before it, and that's according to this list here where it just explains all the class features for sorcerer, those are all the meta options. As you can see, it says like meta twin spell, meta transmuted spell. These are all meta magic options. You can only use 1 meta magic option per spell cast unless otherwise specified, and for now you can select 1 meta branch feature from sorcerer to gain. You can gain access to more by taking branches as normal. So basically, when you take this feature, the meta magic feature itself, you also get to pick any one of these other features around in this area that are meta feature or meta magic features. This allows you to gain one of the options really quickly, but then as the rest of them you'll have to gain access to as you normally would to get these branches. You can also convert sorcery points to spell slots and spell slots to sorcery points if need be. When converting sorcery points to spell slots, use this chart. To create a first level spell, you'll need 2 sorcery points, a second requires 3, a third requires 5, fourth requires 6, and fifth requires 7. And when you're converting spell slots to sorcery points, you just gain points equal to the spell slot level. And at the end of a long rest, you regain any expended sorcery points that you've used throughout the day. So, a pretty great feature, and really to understand how good that is, we need to start explaining how meta magics actually work themselves. So let's start moving this way. First, a +1 SP, which again, like I said, this describes the fact that you're going to be getting more sorcery points as you level up. So we started with 2, but now we'll have 3 per long rest. Another +1 SP. And our first meta magic option. This is Focused Spell, which says you can spend 1 sorcery point per creature within the spell's area to cause only one of those creatures within the spell's area to make a save. On a fail or success, they take damage times the number of creatures other than itself within the area. So for example, 3 allies surrounding a Minotaur, and you cast Fireball on all of them, but then used Focused Spell, it would cost 4 sorcery points, but then you could focus all of that energy into the Minotaur and make only the Minotaur make the save, and then take 3 times the regular fireball damage no matter they fail or succeed, which is an awesome use for your area of effect spells when there aren't groups of enemies to be targeting. A very fun and interesting way to use, area of effect spells. And after that, we can pick up a +1 to our proficiency bonus, before picking up another +2 spells known. So now we're going to be up to 6 at this point. Our next meta magic option will be Twinned Spell. Now, Twinned Spell says that when you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature in range with the same spell. 1 sorcery point if the spell is a cantrip. To be eligible, a spell must be incapable of targeting more than 1 creature at the spell's current level. For example, Magic Missile and Scorching Ray are not eligible, but Ray of Frost and Chromatic Orb are. Everybody likes Twin Spell. I mean, you twin haste on 2 of your allies and they run in kicking. Don't lose concentration on that, but if you don't, it's a great combo. And we can pick up another proficiency bonus increase over here. This is one thing that a sorcerer will have over some martials, is more access to proficiency bonus sooner. As you can see, there's actually a lot of proficiency bonus increases on the sorcerer list compared to some of the other classes. The problem with them is they're spread out across a lot of these metamagic options. So in order to get a really high proficiency bonus using the sorcerer, you'll probably have to take a lot of different options, which isn't a bad thing, but just something to keep in mind when you're thinking of builds. The next metamagic option we'll be talking about is Reworked Spell. Reworked Spell says you can spend 2 sorcery points to change the saving throw of a spell to any saving throw of your choice. So, you can change that Cone of Cold's Constitution saving throw into a Strength saving throw. If you think you're up against a bunch of dexterous fellows that have no strength, they're about to freeze. We'll continue left here with another +1 to our sorcery point pool. Another +2 to our caster level. And our next metamagic option, which is Transmuted Spell. This says when you cast a spell that deals a type of damage from the following list, you can spend 1 sorcery point to change that damage to a type one of the others listed types, which is acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder damage. So if you cast something like Thunder Wave, you could turn it into Acid Wave for fun by just spending a sorcery point. Next up, we'll pick up another sorcery point and another +2 spells unknown. And now we'll move into our next metamagic option, which is Prepped Spell, which says that you can spend 1 sorcery point to cast a spell as an attack of opportunity. This is really useful because it means that we would not have to take Warcaster to do this. Up next, another +1 to our sorcery points, and another +2 to our caster levels. Again, these are going to stack up much faster than the other classes we looked at, and by the end of the video, I'm going to show you what a max level sorcerer's caster level looks like, and how many spell slots they have access to. But our next metamagic option is Speedy Spell, which says that when you cast a spell with a casting time of 1 minute or longer, you can spend 1 sorcery point to reduce the time by 10 minutes down to an action. You can spend multiple sorcery points in this manner to lower the time even more if its casting time is longer than 10 minutes. So, if you had a casting time of 1 hour, you could spend 6 sorcery points and bring it all the way down to an action. That's pretty cool. We'll pick up another feat, and you can really start seeing how much slower the feat and ASI progression is on these casters. When you look at this, we've taken a lot of branches already, but all we have is 2 feats. We don't even have an ASI yet. Now, I could have taken a different path to get an ASI a lot quicker. In fact, there's one right over here. But on the fighter, we had 2 feats and I think 3 ASIs by this time. So keep in mind, that's one of the differences between these full casters and martial builds. But our next metamagic option will be Empowered Spell, which says that when you roll damage for a spell, you can spend 1 sorcery point to reroll a number of damage dice up to your Charisma modifier, minimum of once. You must use these new rolls, and you can use Empowered Spell even if you already used a different metamagic option during the casting of the spell. Which is pretty nice, If you want to pump the damage up on one of your spells, throw an extra sorcery point onto it. We'll get another proficiency bonus increase over here and move into another metamagic option, this being Enlarged Spell. This one is probably one of the stronger options, and it says that when you cast a spell that uses an area of effect, such as a sphere or a line, you can spend sorcery points equal to the spell's level to double the size targeted. So if you wanted to make that lightning bolt twice as long and twice as wide, you'd have to dump 3 sorcery points into it, but it's probably worth it if you're going to be hitting more enemies with it. Another +1 to our sorcery point pool, and a +1 to our cantrips. Now this is notable because we haven't actually seen this yet, because the Crusader and Paladin didn't gain cantrips in the typical sense. Full casters normally would pick up cantrips very similar to how proficiency bonus increase would go up. You would pick up your proficiency bonus as you leveled, but it wouldn't really be part of any specific feature. The cantrip system for casters is just like the caster level for casters. You pick them up as you level, so you don't have to pick up a lot of cantrips if you're not feeling like it, but if you really want to take a bunch of cantrips, you could have done it this way to grab the cantrip right away. Of course, afterwards, there is a metamagic option available to us as well, which is Careful Spell. When you cast a spell that forces other creatures to make a saving throw, you can protect some of those creatures from the spell's full force. To do so, spend 1 sorcery point and choose a number of those creatures up to your Charisma modifier, minimum of 1 creature. A chosen creature automatically succeeds its saving throw against the spell. Now, notably, Focused Spell is better for protecting your allies if there's only one enemy that you want to focus all the energy into. But, for example, if your Barbarian and Fighter are amongst a horde of zombies and you want to fireball them, you might want to throw down Careful Spell just to make sure that they don't take a ton of damage from the spell and you can still melt all those zombies. Next up, we'll pick another sorcery point up before grabbing our first ability score improvement, at least in the direction I'm taking it. Of course, you could have, again, picked up some of these ones over here, but I didn't go that direction. So we'll move next into Distant Spell, which is a metamagic that says when you cast a spell that has a range of 5 feet or greater, you can spend 1 sorcery point to double the range of the spell. And when you cast a spell that has a range of touch, you can spend 1 sorcery point to make the range of the spell 30 feet. I mean, most of the time your range is going to be plenty, but every so often you'll run into that situation where if you just had an extra 20 feet on your spell, it would make a huge difference. Another metamagic option off that ASI is Heightened Spell, which says that when you cast a spell that forces a creature to make a saving throw to resist its effects, you can spend 3 sorcery points to give one target of the spell disadvantage on its first saving throw made against the spell. Not a bad spell by any means. I mean, just, causing disadvantage will always help get those spells off. And if it's a crucial spell, it might be worth the 3 sorcery points. We'll pick up another +1 to our sorcery points, and then another +2 to our casters. Now we'll take this quick detour to grab another +2 to our sorcery point pool before grabbing Quickened Spell. This is one that many people enjoy, which says when you cast a spell that has a casting time of 1 action, you can spend 2 sorcery points to change the casting time to a bonus action for this casting. Now, notably, this does not get you around the bonus action casting rules, which basically says that whenever you cast a spell as a bonus action, the only spells you're allowed to cast with your action for that turn will be cantrips. You can still cast spells as a reaction when it's not your turn, but for the rest of that turn, even if you use something like Action Surge, you wouldn't be allowed to cast anything other than cantrips. There is a feat that would allow you to get past this, and I'll talk about it more when we get to the Sorcerer feats that I want to talk about. But before that, of course, we'll pick up the other 3 sorcery points at the end of this line, and that brings us to an interesting point that I want to bring up, is that most of these sorcery metamagics that you'll be picking up are around a 6 to 8 branch investment, but once you pick up metamagic, they're around a 3 to 4 branch investment instead. And that's because basically metamagic links all of these together, which makes the sorcerer a really unique looking tree because it's basically got 2 routes here. One that is all the metamagics, and the other one which we'll get to later. Next, we'll pick up another +1 to our sorcery point pool, another +2 to our caster level, and a metamagic option which is Sentient Spell. Sentient Spell says that you can spend 2 sorcery points to pick an unoccupied space within 30 feet and cast the spell from that location instead of your own. Now, this is not Subtle Spell, keep in mind. You're still casting the spell So if a viewer was watching you, they would see you casting the spell. What it does allow is you to cast things through walls because you pick an unoccupied space within 30 feet of yourself and cast the spell. It does not say within sight or within view. I mean, as long as you know the space is unoccupied, you can use the space. This also would allow you to cast touch spells from 30 feet away without being in danger. So you could be behind full cover and be casting these things from basically just a point in the air. A pretty fun one. And of course, afterwards we can pick up the proficiency bonus increase before moving into this metamagic option, which is Seeking Spell. When you cast a spell that requires you to make a spell attack roll, or one that forces a target to make a dexterity saving throw, you can spend 1 sorcery point to ignore the effects of half and 3/4 cover against targets of the spell. Sentient Spell is very similar to Seeking Spell, but keep in mind that Sentient Spell not give you the benefits of things like attack rolls. You know, if you're casting something like Scorching Ray, but the target is behind cover, which if you're using Sentient Spell behind cover, they would be considered behind cover, they're going to get a boost to their AC when that attack roll is made. With Seeking Spell, although, that is ignored. And so they both have their benefits, but they are slightly different. Next, we'll pick up another +1 to our sorcery point pool, another 2 spells known, and a metamagic which is Deranged Spell. Deranged Spell says select 2 spells and use the range and area of one and the damage or effect of the other. Doing so will cost sorcery points equal to both spell levels combined. So, for example, you could cast something that has a larger area of effect, such as Sleep, and use something like Thunderwave, which usually has a bit of a smaller range, and do a lot of damage, although this effect would of course cost you 2 sorcery points since both of them are first level spells. And so, if you want to keep scaling this, it could be very fun to think of weird combos to use, but the higher the spell's level, of course, the more expensive it's going to get. And our final branches from the metamagic field is this sorcery point here, before we move into another +2 to our spells known. And first we'll go over Extended Spell, which says that when you cast a spell that has a duration of 1 minute or longer, you can spend 1 sorcery point to double its duration, to a maximum of 24 hours. This is another one of those that, like, I don't know how useful this could be. Maybe there's a use for it, but I don't really prefer this one. A much more fun time-based metamagic is Delayed Spell, which says that when you cast an instantaneous spell, you can spend 1 sorcery point to have the effect delayed for 1 round. Notably, this is not concentration. You still must decide where the spell will go off or what it will target, and for every round you wish to keep delaying it, it will require 1 more sorcery point. So say you have 6 sorcery points, you could delay the spell for 6 rounds. It doesn't, unlike delayed Fireball Blast, it's not going to like do extra damage by being delayed, but if you're trying to lay a trap and you want to layer a bunch of spells on top of each other, it could get expensive really quick if you're layering multiple delayed spells on top of each other, but they can all go off whenever you choose to just stop spending sorcery points every round. Could lead to some fun shenanigans. Next, we'll pick up another +2 to our caster level. And then Other Spell, which says that you can spend 1 sorcery point to make a sleight of hand check. Any creature whose perception check is lower than the roll will think the spell you are casting is being cast by a creature of your choice. Now, this and Subtle Spell are next to each other because they're very similar. This one, basically, if you've got a decent sleight of hand modifier, could be even better than Subtle Spell. But if anybody notices, they will see it. It's not actually hiding any of the components. It's just basically using sleight of hand to make other people look like the one casting it. Speaking of Subtle Spell, That's the next meta magic we'll discuss, which says that when you cast a spell, you can spend 1 sorcery point to cast it without any semantic or verbal components. Now, in my opinion, Subtle Spell and Other Spell are very similar, but they both have their ups and downs. Other Spell is way better in crowds that are less perceptive, I would say, but Subtle Spell is probably the better one overall because it also can help you in an environment where you are perhaps tied down or your mouth is covered, so you can't use verbal components. You can use Subtle Spell to still cast that spell anyway. We'll move on to the other half of the Sorcerer, which starts us off with another ability score improvement. And will lead into Initiate Overflow. This is very similar to the effect that they added to the Sorcerer in the newest version of D&D, and it says you can bring yourself into an empowered state capable of casting spells even more effectively than normal. Once per long rest, you can overflow your magic prowess. For 1 minute, your spell save DC is increased by +1, and when you make a spell attack roll, you have advantage. And when you spend sorcery points, you heal the same amount of hit points as sorcery points spent. Now, the healing is a bit especially on a class that's not going to want to get hit in the first place, but it could come in handy if you're backing away and because you just got a big hit on you to, have a few hit points of healing while you're casting spells. But the most important part here is that your spell save DC is increased and you have advantage on every attack roll. Notably, also, Initiate Overflow does not require a bonus action, or reaction, or anything to start up. You can just go into this state once per long rest. Super fun and effective. Continuing upward, we'll pick up a +2 caster and another +1 to our cantrips. Again, most of these features are going to be simple stat increases to things like caster level, cantrip level, spells known, sorcery points, so it's not going to be quite as cool as some of the other classes, especially martials, which get a lot more features than spellcasters, but these are important features to get on your character, so don't stray away from them. We'll pick up another feat and a +3 to our caster level before picking up a proficiency bonus increase, and the next feature on the sorcery list is Break Free, which says that when you overflow, you can now spend up to 2 metamagic options per spell. You also regain overflow on a short rest. So this is a wonderful feature and really shows how powerful the sorcerer can be if you really focus on the class itself. It is a little bit less resilient than a lot of the other spellcasters because of its low hit points, and especially not getting a whole lot of those ASIs, which can really, bump their stats up. They in total only have 3, which is a lot lower than many classes. But you don't really need a lot of stats if all of your spells are hitting, because if all your spells are hitting, they probably don't matter that much. And that's what's important. Making Break Free allow you to use your overflow on a short rest just makes it way more, really just makes it a more useful and more often useful ability. And being able to use 2 metamagic options per spell you cast is a very nice touch. There are occasions where you being able to use 2 at a time could come in handy. And to finish off this path, we'll pick up a +3 to our sorcery point pool and a +4 caster. And this path, of course, is an 11 branch commitment, which is about 5.5 levels. So keep that in mind. The other side of this is going to be a +1 cantrip, and we'll go this way before we move down to the main path, which is, of course, our ASI. A nice thing to pick up, especially on the Sorcerer, before we pick up Divine Origin. It basically allows you to be the Divine Soul Sorcerer if you really want to. It gives you access to the Cleric spell list, in the same way that you have access to the Sorcery spell list. Very nice. Moving on, we'll get a +2 to our known spells, a +2 to our caster level, and Sorceress Restoration, which says that we regain our Charisma modifier in sorcery points on a short rest. Okay, not bad. If you're running low on sorcery points often, picking this branch up could be really helpful to just give you that little bit more push during those short rests. And rounding out the rest of the class, we'll get more sorcery points, more caster levels, another proficiency bonus increase, more spells known, another feat, and finish it off with another +4 to our caster level. This path is a 12-branch commitment, making it a whole 6 levels to get all the way to this +4 caster. But keep in mind, +4 caster is a big bump to your spellcasting abilities. In total, the sorcerer gets up to level 32 on caster, which means that their casting potential is way above most spellcasters. This is nearing the maximum, which the only class in the game that gets to maximum on their base class is the wizard. But the sorcerer gets pretty close. That is all of the features available in the class tree, the sorcerer, but we can go over some feats that help sorcerers out a lot next. Feats that really can make sorcerers feel a lot better include things like Learned. I talked about this earlier, but it allows you to grant access to a spell list of your choice, and you can take this up to twice. This I would actually give a decent recommendation for your origin feat, because gaining extra spell lists is somewhat niche sometimes, but for the sorcerer this can come in a lot of handy because their metamagic has been catered towards the sorcerer spell list. So mixing in a couple spells from things like, I don't know, Druid, or maybe you want to pick up the Ranger spell list for some weird combos, might make you into a really interesting sorcerer that feels a lot different than many of the other options that you've seen before. Another feat that I think works really well, especially for sorcerers, is Spell Sniper, which gives you a +1 in Wisdom, Charisma, Intelligence, or Constitution, probably going to be your spellcasting modifier or stat, and offensive spells range is doubled. And these spells ignore half and 3/4 cover, which means that you're not going to need to pick up that metamagic that allows you to ignore cover if you have Spell Sniper. Moving into an initiate feat that works really well with the sorcerer is Sorcerer Initiate. Now, this has been a common theme. Most classes' initiate feats work really well with them, and that's no exception for the Sorcerer. When you take Sorcerer Initiate, you gain a number of sorcery points equal to your proficiency bonus that are recovered on a long rest. Given that you start with 2 sorcery points, this is a huge boost because you'll probably get another 2 at least, maybe even 3. And then you select 1 meta branch from Sorcerer to gain the features of. Another great, this is basically getting metamagic twice, so you get to pick 2 metamagics from anywhere on the list instead of having to get them normally if you get all the way to metamagic while picking up this feat. This can allow you to, if you wanted to build a class that wasn't really sorcerer based but wanted to take a few metamagic options, grab this feat, pick up metamagic to pick up a different one, and then leave behind the sorcerer if you want to make, like, you know, a wizard that had a lot of metamagic options. Or perhaps you're playing something like a Warlock, but you wanted to mix a few metamagic options in, you could get a couple of sorcery points and then pull off this feat as well as metamagic from the sorcery tree to get a little bit of those options going. Another initiate feat that I would recommend for sorcerers is the Thaumaturge Initiate, which says that when you make an Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma, or Constitution saving throw, you can use your reaction to cast a spell that targets the creature who caused you to make the save. Very useful. Another spellcasting based feat that I personally really like for a class especially that can cast spells as a bonus action with Quicken Spell is Charged Casting. This says you can ignore the bonus action casting rule, which is really nice when you use Quicken Spell to speed up your casting. And you can charge a spell with extra energy to make legendary resistance not work for the spell's saving throw. You may use this 3 times before taking a long rest. So basically, the bonus action casting rule is added, but then you also basically get 3 points, if you want to call them that, of charged casting, where when you cast a spell with this, the creature still makes the saving throw as normal, but if they fail to save, they can't use legendary resistance to succeed anyway. It just doesn't work that way. And if you take this 2 times, so a level 2 charged casting, you can use you may charge a spell in this manner proficiency bonus times per long rest instead of just 3, but you still get the minimum of 3 if your proficiency bonus is under 3 for now. The only other feat I want to talk about for the Sorcerer is perhaps you're worried about getting attacked. You could pick up Well Armored, which allows you to gain proficiency in either light, medium, or heavy armor, and you also gain proficiency in either light shields, shields, or heavy shields. So basically just allow you to pick up a little bit of armor for your caster if you're worried about getting attacked too many times. All that being said and done, the Sorcerer is a lot different from the martial classes, but I still really liked talking about it. And if you guys enjoyed this video as well, you can leave me a like, subscribe. I finally got the Google Docs going, and I'm going to start putting these skill trees and all the lists of features that they provide in there. So if you want to check the description down below, you can look at what I've currently got out there. It's just going to be the ones I've made videos for so far. Because I kind of, as I'm going through these, I'm looking through and kind of checking my own work to make sure that I haven't done anything wrong, spelled anything incorrectly. Obviously, there's going to be mistakes. I'm only one person. But I'm trying to get rid of as many of these mistakes as possible and make sure that everything is as balanced as I possibly can with the very limited playtesting that I've done. That being said, if there's a specific class you want to see me do next, I'm going to have in the description a list of all the ones I haven't talked about yet. And if you want to look at that and pick one you want to see next, you can do that and put it in the comments. And if somebody picks one, I will probably put their name up on screen and say, hey, this person wanted this one next and it got the most upvotes or whatever, so this is the one I'm doing next. But all that being said, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a nice day, and goodbye.